Myanmar's junta-run elections are underway as civil war rages on in the country, marking its 5th year. The first round of voting is closed. However, young voters were largely absent as tightly controlled polling began on Sunday. Critics in the United Nations say this election is designed to prolong military rule. Let's now talk about the Sunday's voter turnout. The turnout appears slightly lower than the previous elections. At several polling stations, fewer than one-third of registered voters cast their ballots. Unlike young voters, older citizens dominated the queues. This is because young people cited fear, displacement, and lack of faith in the process.
With every 5-year change of government, I vote as a citizen, hoping that the country will improve.
I don't think there will be any changes. I think this is for them, the junta, to change their soldier uniforms into civilian ones and to hold on to their power.
Voting is taking place only in junta-controlled areas. Nearly 1 in 5 constituencies will see no polling at all. This is due to ongoing fighting with rebel groups. The election will be held in 3 phases, with the final round scheduled for January 25th. Jailed leader and Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League for Democracy party are not taking part in the polls. Aung San Suu Kyi's party, which won a landslide in 2020 but has been dissolved by the military, the pro-junta Union Solidarity and Development Party is widely expected to emerge as the largest bloc. Junta chief Min Aung Hlaing cast his vote in Naypyidaw. He insisted the election was free and fair and urged citizens to participate. But the United Nations says Myanmar's future must be decided through a free, fair, inclusive and credible process. Meanwhile, dozens of protesters held placards denouncing Myanmar's, quote, sham election outside its embassy in Tokyo. Myanmar has been in civil war since the 2021 coup. An estimated 90,000 people have been killed since then, while millions have been displaced. As voting continues into January, critics say the election risks entrenching military rule rather than restoring democracy. Joining us live from Glasgow is Nathan Paul Sutton, a columnist and an investigative journalist. He is also a researcher at the University of St. Andrews. Mr. Sutton, thanks very much for your time. I know it is obvious why the youth in Myanmar are disenfranchised but in your view, what's driving the voter apathy among the youth voters in Myanmar?
Well, it's quite clearly a complete sham election, and to the point where people are being arrested, they're put in prison, and they're even being attacked if they criticise the election. There have been Myanmar filmmakers who have been in prison recently just for criticising a pro-election film that was made. There's no real effort to try to make this a fair election or a real shift to democracy. It's really just a very, very transparent sign to potential countries that they could work with, where that's maybe potentially Donald Trump in the United States, to try to symbol that we are doing just enough that we need to do for you to justify lifting some sanctions and for us to begin to do some business together.
Mr. Sutton, there is fear that the results are predictable and may be rejected by some quarters, including some international communities, despite the junta arguing that the process will be free and fair. But what would really legitimize the vote?
What could legitimise the vote is if they had not banned 40 different parties who were vocally opposed to the junta's civil war that had been raging for 5 years. The fact that the only parties that are really included in this election are pro-junta parties completely shows the sham nature of this election. Also, on top of that, the country is not in any position to currently hold an election. There is up to about half of the country right now that will not be included because of intense fighting that is still raging, much of which is being led by the junta while they're trying to push this idea. of a fair election. Now, the junta has also in the last few months tried to legitimise themselves in other areas by, for instance, cracking down on some of the scam compound areas up by the Thailand border. Again, these are just a sign to the international community, particularly China and the United States, that they are moving themselves away from this criminal involvement in their government. But it's not a real crackdown, nor is it a real crackdown on the massive methamphetamine trade that the junta is ruling. And since the junta announced the elections, they could have minimised the amount of strikes that they've hit into civilian areas. There have been over 800 strikes, air strikes from the junta since August when they announced this election, and one of the most recent of which was hitting a hospital that killed 30 civilians. So without actually stopping these kind of actions, then the military are showing no effort to really legitimise themselves or the country.